Krell had been working campus security at Galactic University for 8 cycles now, and in all that time, the most exciting thing he dealt with was a Flubian student trying to smuggle fermented algae into the dormitories. He was a Vranthi, which meant he was approximately 4 feet tall, covered in blue-gray scales, and possessed all the natural intimidation of a nervous accountant. Campus security was supposed to be boring, safe, a nice quiet job where the biggest threat was students pulling pranks during finals week. So when every single biosecurity alarm in the northern quad started screaming at once, Krell's morning beverage ended up on his console, his breakfast ended up on the floor, and his dignity ended up somewhere in between. Code Vermilion! Code Vermilion! The computer's voice was doing that thing where it got shrill and panicky, which Krell had always thought was poor programming. Deathworld Apex Predator detected. Threat level, catastrophic. Initiating emergency. Protocols. Krell's 3-fingered hands flew across the screen, pulling up camera feeds with the kind of speed that only comes from pure, distilled panic. His eye stalks extended to their full length, scanning multiple monitors at once. This couldn't be happening. Not on his shift. Not on a Tuesday. The biosecurity grid was having a complete meltdown. Every sensor in a 60-meter radius was flashing red. Atmospheric analysis. Elevated danger. Movement patterns. Pursuit predator. Biological markers. Dear merciful cosmos. The biological markers. Containment fields active. Krell slammed the lockdown button. Doors sealed throughout the quad. Emergency barriers dropped from the ceiling. Students scattered in every direction, which was exactly what prey species were supposed to do when an apex predator was detected. So at least someone had paid attention during the safety briefings. And there, right in the center of every sensor going absolutely berserk, was the threat. A human. Walking, with a backpack and a disposable cup of something steaming. His name was Jake Thompson, according to the student ID that popped up on Krell's screen, and he appeared to be completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just triggered every alarm system designed to protect the university from Death World-class organisms. He was moving at what humans probably considered a normal pace, but what the sensors were interpreting as a sustained pursuit gait. His bipedal locomotion was efficient, predatory, and according to the readouts, he could apparently maintain this pace for absurd distances. Jake checked his watch, took a sip from his cup, and sped up slightly. Every sensor's pitch increased by half an octave. No, 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 no. Krell muttered, his tail lashing behind him in agitation. He pulled up Jake's file with trembling hands. Exchange student. From Earth. Class 12, Death World. Oh, that's just perfect. That's just absolutely perfect. Jake seemed to notice the running. Students. He paused, looked around with those forward-facing predator eyes, and then shrugged. His expression suggested he thought this was a fire drill. A fire drill. As if the screaming alarms and the emergency barriers and the campus-wide panic were just routine safety procedures. A small Pibian student, a turtle-like creature named Pibbles, had frozen in fear directly in Jake's path. This was textbook prey response. Freeze and hope the predator doesn't notice you. Except it absolutely never worked on persistence hunters, which humans definitely were. Jake walked up to Pibbles. He bent down. He reached out with one of those 5-fingered manipulation appendages. He's attacking! Krell squeaked into his communicator. The human is engaging. I need backup at Grid 7 immediately. On the screen, Jake gently touched Pibbles' shoulder. He appeared to be asking if the student was okay. His face showed what was probably concern, though it was hard to tell with humans. They had way too many teeth. Pibbles' eyes rolled back, and he fainted directly onto the quadrangle grass. Jake looked down at the unconscious student, looked around at the chaos, looked back at his watch. Then he straightened up, adjusted his backpack, and continued walking toward the physics building. Like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just caused a campus-wide evacuation by existing. Krell stared at his monitors, his mouth hanging open, his emergency communicator buzzing with 17 incoming calls from panicked administrators. Humans, he thought, were going to be the death of him, and Jake Thompson was going to be late for Intro to Quantum Mechanics. Commander Thoop, we have a situation. Krell was trying very hard to keep his voice steady, but it came out about 3 octaves higher than normal. On the screen, Commander Thoop's translucent, jellyfish-like form pulsed with bioluminescent concern. Thoop was technically Krell's supervisor, though supervisor implied a level of decisiveness that Thoop had never actually demonstrated in his entire career. A situation? What kind of situation? Is it the fermented algae again? Because I told Dean Wibbers that we needed stricter contraband policies. It's a human, sir. The pulsing stopped. Commander Thoop's entire body went rigid, which was impressive considering he didn't have a skeleton. A human. As in, from Earth? The planet where everything is trying to kill everything else, and the dominant species decided the best survival strategy was to just outlast all of it? That would be the one, sir. And he's on campus? Walking to class, sir. The biosecurity grid is having a complete existential crisis about it. Thoop's form rippled with what might have been a sigh, or possibly the beginning of a panic attack. Pull up his file. Please tell me he's at least a philosophy student or something harmless. Krell's claws clicked across his console. Exchange student. Physics major. Name: Jake Thompson. Age: 20 standard cycles. From a place called, he squinted at the screen, Ohio. Home planet classification: Class 12 Death World. Gravity: 1.03 standard. Atmosphere: oxygen-nitrogen mix with trace toxins. Native predator count: you don't want to know, sir. I really don't, but go on. According to his biometric data, he contains approximately 40 trillion bacteria, most of which would be classified as biological hazards on 70% of member worlds. His body produces something called adrenaline that would function as a combat stimulant for most species, except humans just have it naturally. And, sir? His file notes that he's a persistence hunter. What does that mean? It means, sir, that his species evolved to chase prey until it literally died from exhaustion. They can run for hours, days, even. They just keep coming. Commander Thoop's bioluminescence flickered erratically. That's horrifying. Yes, sir. And he's just walking to class? Yes, sir. He appears to be running late. Meanwhile, Jake had made it approximately 50 meters closer to the physics building, which meant 50 meters deeper into campus, which meant the panic radius was expanding proportionally. Students were evacuating in concentric circles around him like he was some kind of bipedal disaster zone. Jake finally seemed to notice that something was off. He stopped walking, which caused 3 nearby security cameras to automatically zoom in on him. He looked around at the fleeing students, the sealed doors, the flashing emergency lights. His face did that thing human faces did where the eyebrows moved, which could mean literally anything from confusion to aggression to existential contemplation. ASPNB. He's analyzing his surroundings, Krell whispered into the communicator. Threat assessment. He's definitely doing threat assessment, or he's wondering why everyone's running away from him, Thoop suggested weakly. A small, turtle-like student, Pibbles had regained consciousness and was now attempting to crawl away while making a high-pitched keening sound. Jake noticed. Of course he noticed. Humans had those forward-facing eyes that could track movement with terrifying precision. Jake walked over to Pibbles. He's engaging again, Krell's voice cracked. Sir, should I deploy the response team? Is the human doing anything threatening? On screen, Jake was kneeling down next to Pibbles. He was speaking, probably asking if the student needed help, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd just been openly hostile. Pibbles was frozen again, eyes wide, every survival instinct screaming at him to play dead. Jake reached into his backpack. He's accessing equipment. Krell nearly fell out of his chair. Sir, he's got something. Jake pulled out a granola bar. He offered it to Pibbles. Pibbles fainted again. Deploy the response team, Commander Thoop said, his bioluminescence now strobing in full alarm mode. But tell them to be careful. If he's offering food, that could be, I don't know, some kind of predator strategy? Do humans do that? According to the cultural database, humans sometimes feed animals to gain their trust before. Sir, this is a student. He's not trying to hunt Pibbles. Can we be sure of that? Krell looked at his screen. Jake had given up on Pibbles and was now checking his watch again. He took another sip of his drink, the steam rising from the cup in a way that made it look almost ominous in the emergency lighting. Then he just kept walking, like this was normal. Like causing a campus-wide evacuation was just part of his morning routine. I'm deploying Captain Rax and his team, Krell said, his fingers already entering the commands. And sir, I'm going to need you to authorize hazard pay for this shift. Approved, Thoop said immediately. And Krell, try not to die. The paperwork would be tremendous. The communicator clicked off. Krell watched Jake Thompson continue his leisurely stroll toward the physics building, blissfully unaware that he was about to have first contact with campus security's elite response team. This was going to be a disaster. Krell started pre-filling the incident report forms, all 17 of them. Captain Rax prided himself on being the kind of security officer who'd seen everything. He was a Korthian, which meant he stood nearly 7 feet tall, had chitinous armor plating, and possessed 4 arms that he frequently used to gesture dramatically while telling stories about his glory days in the Galactic Defense Force. He'd faced down smugglers, broken up protest riots, and once talked a Venusian slime mold out of absorbing a visiting diplomat. A single human college student? Please. Listen up, team, Rax announced as he checked his plasma rifle for the 3rd time. We're dealing with a Class 12 Deathworlder here. That means we stay sharp, we stay focused, and we absolutely do not engage in close-quarters combat. Understood? His team consisted of 5 officers, all of whom looked significantly less confident than their captain. Officer Vin, a mammalian species with too many eyes, was actually shaking. Sir, I've read the briefings on humans, Vin said quietly. They can survive injuries that would kill most of us. They have redundant organ systems. Their bones are practically reinforced with calcium deposits, and apparently they think drinking ethanol is recreational, which is why we have plasma rifles, Vin. Overwhelming firepower. Strategic positioning. This is textbook containment. Rax's mandibles clicked confidently. I've handled worse than this. Have you, though? Asked Officer Plex, a floating orb of crystalline intelligence. Have you really handled worse than a persistence predator with binocular vision and opposable thumbs? Everybody shut up. We're moving out. They found Jake approximately 30 meters from the physics building entrance. He was standing still now. Finally, bless the cosmos, and appeared to be scrolling through his communication device with one hand while holding his beverage in the other. Steam still rose from the cup, which their threat assessment software had flagged as a potential chemical weapon dispersal system. It was coffee. Just coffee. But the sensors didn't know that. Positions, Rax whispered into his comm. His team fanned out in a semicircle, plasma rifles raised, creating a tactical perimeter that would have made his old Defense Force instructors proud. Jake looked up from his phone. His eyes went wide. Oh, come on, Jake said, and his voice had that particular tone of someone whose day had officially gone from bad to worse. Is this because I forgot to register my vaccination records? Do not move, human. Rax's voice amplifier made him sound appropriately intimidating. You are in violation of Campus Safety Protocol Omega-7. Drop any biological weapons and place your manipulator appendages where we can. See them. Jake looked down at his hands, at his phone, at his coffee cup. My. Biological weapons? Now, human. Okay. Jake's hands shot up in surrender, except the movement was so sudden and so fast that it triggered every officer's threat response simultaneously. Plasma rifles whined as they charged. Vin made a sound like a deflating balloon. The coffee cup tumbled from Jake's hand in slow motion. It hit the ground. The lid popped off. Hot coffee splashed across the quadrangle pavement, steaming in the cool morning air. The entire security team flinched backward. One officer actually fired, but his plasma bolt went wide and scorched a decorative bush instead. Hold fire! Rax bellowed. It's just his beverage. Jake was frozen with his hands up, staring at the spilled coffee with an expression of profound loss. That was a 4-credit latte, he said mournfully. I waited in line for 15 minutes. Silence. Rax advanced 3 steps, keeping his rifle, trained on Jake's center mass. You will surrender any weapons, contraband, or hazardous materials in your possession. You will comply with all security directives. You will... Dude, I'm literally just trying to get to class. Jake slowly lowered his hands to a less threatening position, which somehow made him look more threatening because now he appeared relaxed. Casual. Like he wasn't surrounded by armed security officers. There's been some kind of mistake. I'm a student here. Physics department. Professor Glebe's Intro to Quantum Mechanics, 2nd period. Likely story, muttered Plex. You have triggered every biosecurity sensor on campus, Rax said, trying to maintain his authoritative tone despite the fact that Jake was now looking at him with an expression that could only be described as deeply confused. Your biological signature registers as a catastrophic threat. You are carrying dangerous bacteria, predatory indicators, and you were observed engaging in pursuit. Behavior. Pursuit behavior? I was walking to class, at high speed. I'm late. And the bacteria? Jake looked down at himself. I showered this morning? I'm really confused about what's happening right now. Rax was about to respond when Jake's face did something terrible. The corners of his mouth curved upward. His lips parted slightly. He smiled. Officer Vin screamed. Every rifle snapped back to maximum alert status. Teeth! Vin shrieked. He's showing teeth. That's an aggression display. No, wait! Jake's hands shot back up, smile vanishing. That's not aggression. That's just smiling. It means I'm friendly. I'm being friendly. Those are omnivore teeth, Plex observed, floating slightly backward. Forward-facing eyes. Grasping appendages. Captain, this is textbook predator morphology. I'm aware, Plex. So what's the plan? Rax's mandibles clicked uncertainly. The plan had been to intimidate the human into surrendering peacefully. The plan had not accounted for the human being polite and confused, and looking like he might actually just be a student who was very, very late for class. Sir, Vin said quietly. His communication device is making noise. Everyone looked at Jake's phone, which had fallen to the ground when he'd raised his hands. Music was blaring from it. Loud, aggressive music with heavy percussion and what sounded like humans yelling rhythmically. It's his war cry, someone shouted. It's my alarm, Jake protested. It's just rock music. It's a song. A war song? A regular song. The standoff continued. Security team terrified, human bewildered, and somewhere in the distance, Krell was watching all of this through security cameras and updating his incident reports. And then, because the universe had a sense of humor, Professor Glebe arrived. Professor Glebe was what happened when you took a brain, made it roughly the size of a beach ball, gave it psychic abilities and the ability to float, and then granted it a PhD in quantum mechanics. He drifted into the standoff zone with the casual energy of someone who had seen this exact scenario play out at least 3 times before. Oh, for the love of entropy, Glebe's telepathic voice echoed in everyone's heads. Rax, put the plasma rifle down. You're terrifying my student. Your student. Rax didn't lower his weapon. Professor, this is a Class 12 Death Worlder who has triggered every biosecurity protocol we have. Yes, I'm aware. His name is Jake. He sits in the 3rd row, takes excellent notes, never turns his assignments in late, currently maintaining a B+ average, which frankly is better than half the class. Glebe floated closer to Jake, his brain mass pulsing with what might have been amusement. Jake, I see you've met our security team. Professor Glebe. Jake's whole posture relaxed with visible relief. Can you please explain to these guys that I'm not dangerous? I'm just trying to get to your class. He claims he was walking to class, Rax said, his tone dripping with suspicion. At elevated speeds. I was late. And before that? Rax consulted a datapad. Before that, you engaged in what you called a morning jog. Care to explain that, human? It's exercise? Jake looked around at the security team like he was hoping someone would help him out. You know, cardiovascular activity? I run for like 30 minutes every morning. It's healthy? Every single security officer exchanged horrified looks. He admits it, Vin whispered. He admits to pursuit predation. It's not predation. It's jogging! For 30 minutes? Plex's crystalline form shimmered with distress. You can run continuously for 30 minutes? Well, yeah. Sometimes longer if I'm training for training. Rax's rifle came back up. You're training? For what? An invasion? For a 10K. It's a race. People do it for fun. The security team processed this information. Humans ran long distances, for recreation, because they enjoyed it. That's the most terrifying thing I've heard all cycle, Vin said quietly. Professor Glebe's telepathic presence felt like a sigh. Rax, I've had 7 human students over the past 4 semesters. All of them jogged. None of them invaded anything. Well, except for the cafeteria. But that was because they extended breakfast hours. Professor, with all due respect, you may have been compromised, Rax said carefully. Humans are known for their ability to form social bonds with other species as a survival strategy. It's entirely possible this one has manipulated you into, oh, please, I'm a disembodied brain with telepathic abilities. If Jake wanted to manipulate me, I'd know. Glebe drifted between Jake and the security team. He's harmless. Mostly. Mostly? Jake looked offended. You did eat that xanthian ghost pepper in the cafeteria last week on a dare. The kitchen staff thought you were going to die. You asked for seconds. It was spicy but not that bad. Rax was frantically typing into his datapad. Consumed a class 7 toxic irritant. Voluntarily. Requested additional servings. He looked up at Jake with something approaching respect mixed with horror. What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. Humans eat spicy food all the time. Your species seeks out pain-inducing chemicals for entertainment? When you say it like that, it sounds weird. But yeah, basically. Officer Vin made the deflating balloon noise again. Jake's phone alarm was still blaring rock music from the ground. He gestured toward it carefully. Can I just turn that off? It's going to drain my battery. Nobody move, Rax shouted. It's a phone. You said it was a war cry summoning ritual. I said it was an alarm. You guys said it was a war cry. Professor Glebe's psychic presence was definitely doing the mental equivalent of rubbing his temples now, which was impressive, considering he didn't have temples. Jake, what's the song? Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses? See? Jungle, predator habitat, war cry. Rax looked vindicated. It's classic rock. It's called Guns N' Roses. That's weapons and the thorny plant that humans associate with danger. They're a band. From the 1,980 seconds. They're not actually guns. Or roses. Glebe floated higher, addressing the security team with the patient tone of someone explaining basic arithmetic to particularly slow students. Listen carefully. Humans name things dramatically. Their music is aggressive sounding, but ultimately harmless. They engage in persistence hunting. Yes. But they also use that same biological drive to jog, play sports, and apparently chase academic deadlines. Jake here is about as dangerous as a flubian with a library card. Hey, Jake protested. I meant that as a compliment. Rax's mandibles clicked uncertainly. Professor, his file says he contains 40 trillion bacteria. So do you. So does everyone. Humans just have different bacteria. Yes, some of it would be problematic for certain species, which is why Jake had to get 17 different vaccinations before coming here, and why he has to follow strict hygiene protocols, which, I might add, he's been perfectly compliant with. I wash my hands like 6 times a day, Jake offered helpfully. It's starting to get annoying, honestly. And the teeth? Vin asked quietly. Jake opened his mouth slightly, pointing at his canines. These are tiny compared to actual predators. Have you seen an earth cat? Those things have fangs. Mine are for, like, eating sandwiches. What's in the sandwiches? Jake hesitated. Do you really want to know? No, several officers said simultaneously. Professor Glebe's brain pulsed with what was definitely amusement now. Rax, I have a class starting in 10 minutes. Can I have my student back? Or are you planning to file him as a dangerous weapon? Captain Rax looked at Jake, at his security team, at Professor Glebe, at the spilled coffee and the crime, still blaring phone and the general absurdity of the entire situation. Fine, he said finally, but I'm escorting him to class, and someone needs to update the biosecurity protocols because clearly they're too sensitive. Or, Glebe suggested. And hear me out here. You could just add humans to the approved species list, so this doesn't happen every time Jake goes for a walk. Rax's mandibles clicked in what might have been embarrassment. I'll look into that. Krell had been watching the entire confrontation through 6 different camera angles, and he'd already started 3 separate incident reports before deleting them and starting over. How exactly did you categorize false alarm caused by student being biologically terrifying but behaviorally harmless? Commander Thoop's panicked voice crackled through his communicator. Status report. Has Rax contained the threat? Sir, Professor Glebe is claiming the human is just a regular student, and we believe the floating brain. Who spends all day with the human? He makes a compelling case, sir. On screen, Professor Glebe was pulling up something on a holographic display. Since we're all here and apparently have time to waste, let me show you Jake's academic record. Attendance, 98%. The only absence being when he had what humans call a cold, which he stayed home for specifically to avoid spreading to other students. Grades, consistent B range. Disciplinary incidents, 0. Campus involvement. Board game club. Intramural zero-gravity frisbee. And he volunteers at the Cultural Exchange Center on weekends. Rax studied the display, his posture gradually shifting from combat-ready to confused. Board game club? We play Settlers of Catan, Jake offered. I'm not even that good at it. Pibbles beats me like every other week. The same Pibbles who fainted? Twice? Yeah, he's really nice once you get to know him. He's got this strategy with sheep resources that's actually pretty clever. Officer Vin lowered his plasma rifle slightly. You play. Games? With other students? Voluntarily? Well, yeah. It's fun. Plus, they have snacks. Glebe's telepathic presence felt smug now. And here, if you'll observe security footage from last week, the holographic display shifted to show Jake in what appeared to be a campus garden area. He was sitting cross-legged on the grass, and next to him was a small, fuzzy creature that looked like a six-legged cat. Jake was gently petting it. The creature was purring, which was apparently universal across multiple species. That's a Meridian comfort animal, Plex observed, floating closer to the display. They only approach beings they sense are peaceful. They're empathically sensitive. Mr. Whiskers loves Jake, Glebe said. Follows him around campus whenever he sees him. Which, now that I think about it, probably didn't help with the apex predator sensors. Mr. Whiskers? Rax's mandibles twitched. I didn't name him, Jake said, defensively. That's what the care staff calls him. He's a good boy, though. His face did that thing again where it softened, which the security team was starting to recognize as affection rather than threat assessment. Krell watched as Rax scrolled through more data. Jake's biometric readings, his class schedule, his meal plan purchases from the cafeteria, heavy on carbohydrates and something called energy drinks, his library records, mostly physics textbooks, and inexplicably, 3 books on galactic history. Finally, Rax let out a long, hissing sigh through his breathing spiracles. So you're telling me that we just mobilized an elite response team, locked down an entire quad, and caused a campus-wide panic because a physics student was walking to class? Quickly, Vin added, while caffeinated, Plex included, with forward-facing eyes and omnivore teeth. Another officer contributed. Yes, Professor Glebe said simply. That is exactly what happened. The security team stood in awkward silence. Jake slowly lowered his hands completely. So, can I go to class now? Or are we still doing the whole standoff thing? Because I really do need to not miss this lecture. We're covering quantum entanglement today, and I'm already confused enough as it is. Rax's shoulders sagged, all 4 arms dropping to his sides in defeat. This was a drill. Sir? Vin looked confused. This was clearly a scheduled emergency response drill to test our reaction times and tactical positioning. Rax's voice had taken on the tone of someone desperately trying to save face. Which you all performed. Adequately. Yes, adequately. But sir, you said adequately, Officer Vin. Right. Adequately. Got it. Jake's expression suggested he knew exactly what was happening, but was polite enough not to call Rax out on it. Well, thanks for the drill. Very realistic. Really got my heart rate up. Your heart rate increased? Several officers tensed again. It's an expression. It means I was nervous. Oh. Professor Glebe's psychic presence radiated satisfaction. Wonderful. Now that we've established Jake is neither invading nor hunting anyone, perhaps we can all get on with our days? I have 17 other students waiting in a lecture hall wondering why their classmate is being held at gunpoint by campus security. Rax holstered his plasma rifle with as much dignity as he could muster. Human, you're free to go. But in the future, perhaps try to walk less predatorially. I literally don't know what that means, but sure, I'll try. Jake bent down carefully to pick up his phone, which had finally stopped playing rock music. The battery icon was flashing red. Great, now I need to charge this. And maybe, Glebe suggested gently, someone could update the biosecurity systems so they don't classify registered students as existential threats? All eyes turned to Krell's camera. In his security office, Krell's tail twitched nervously. I'll submit a request to IT. Today, Krell. Today. Yes. Absolutely today. Jake surveyed the scene one more time. The scorch mark on the decorative bush, his spilled coffee forming a small caffeinated lake on the pavement. The security team still looking vaguely traumatized, and Professor Glebe floating there like a disappointed parent. This is the weirdest Tuesday I've ever had, Jake said finally. Wait until midterms, Glebe responded. Last semester, a human student pulled what they called an all-nighter, and the medical staff thought he was suffering from a neurological disorder because he'd gone 26 hours without sleep. That's actually pretty normal for midterms. Every alien present made a noise of distress. Your species, Rax said slowly, can just choose not to sleep? For a while, yeah, it's not great for you, but stop. Just stop. I don't want to know. Rax turned to his team. Everyone back to your posts. This drill is concluded. And someone, please file a report stating that humans are weird but non-threatening unless provoked. How do we provoke them? Vin asked nervously. Jake shrugged. I don't know. Be rude? Hurt someone I care about? Cut in line at the cafeteria? Cutting in line is an act of war? Plex sounded genuinely curious. It's definitely rude. The security team dispersed slowly, casting backward glances at Jake like he might suddenly transform into something more obviously threatening. Rax lingered for a moment, his mandibles clicking in what might have been contemplation. For what it's worth, Rax said quietly. You handled that well. Stayed calm. Didn't escalate. That's good tactical awareness. Thanks? Jake looked uncertain about whether that was a compliment or an assessment. Don't mention it. Especially don't mention it to anyone. My reputation is suffering enough today. With that, Captain Rax strode away, trying to project confidence despite the fact that he'd just held a physics student at gunpoint for the crime of being late to class. Professor Glebe bobbed up and down in what might have been a laugh. Come on, Jake, let's get you to class, and maybe stop by the cafeteria on the way. I believe you're owed a replacement coffee after this disaster. 4 credits, Jake said mournfully, looking at the spilled latte one more time. I'll expense it as cultural integration costs. They headed toward the physics building, floating brain and slightly traumatized human, leaving behind a very confused security team and one very stressed Krell who was already on his 17th incident report revision. The news of the incident, as it was now being called in hushed whispers across campus, spread faster than a Venusian slime mold in a humidity chamber. By lunch period, everyone knew. The human had been surrounded by armed security, had casually talked his way out of it, and had apparently been more concerned about his spilled coffee than the plasma rifles. Jake became an instant celebrity, though not exactly in the way he'd hoped. Students would spot him in the hallways and either scramble to get out of his way or, increasingly, try to snap photos with him. The campus social network exploded with posts like, "Saw the Death Worlder in the cafeteria. He was eating a sandwich," and "The human smiled at me, and I didn't die. AMA." Pibbles, once he'd fully recovered from his fainting episodes and received a lengthy explanation from Professor Glebe, had actually sought Jake out to apologize. "I'm so sorry I fainted," Pibbles had said, his turtle-like head withdrawn slightly into his shell. Twice. That was really embarrassing. "Dude, don't worry about it," Jake had responded, which only made him more popular because apparently humans just forgave social transgressions without elaborate ritual apologies. "Want to grab lunch? I promise I'm not scary once you get used to me." They'd become friends. Actual friends. Pibbles had introduced Jake to 3 other students, who'd introduced him to 5 more. And suddenly Jake had a social circle that didn't scatter in terror when he approached, though he did notice people still gave him a slightly wider berth in crowded hallways. The board game club's next meeting had record attendance, with at least a dozen students showing up just to see the human who'd survived first contact with campus security. Jake won exactly 0 games that night but taught everyone a human card game called BS that involved lying convincingly, which horrified and delighted his classmates in equal measure. "Your species has games based on deception?" one student had asked. "We have entire television shows based on it," Jake had replied, which spawned a 3-hour conversation about human entertainment that left everyone more confused about Earth than when they'd started. Krell, for his part, had filed 17 incident reports, received a formal reprimand from Commander Thoop for excessive response to non-threat scenario, and developed what the medical staff diagnosed as acute stress-induced paranoia. He'd started therapy sessions with a counselor, though he'd also gained a strange sort of respect for Jake. The human had been surrounded by weapons, had stayed calm, had de-escalated through sheer politeness, and had somehow made everyone else look like the unreasonable ones. That took a special kind of courage, or obliviousness. Krell wasn't entirely sure which. The biosecurity systems had been updated with a new protocol. Registered human students, expected biological parameters, do not panic. It had implemented it within 6 hours, which was apparently the fastest they'd ever responded to anything. Captain Rax refused to discuss the incident publicly, but had privately admitted to Krell that humans were tactically concerning but strategically fascinating. He'd started reading human military history in his spare time and had become deeply disturbed by something called the Battle of Thermopylae. They chose to fight to the death, Rax had asked Krell over their lunch break. As a strategy? Apparently humans find that inspirational, sir. They're insane. All of them. Brilliant, but insane. 2 weeks after the incident, Jake was running late again. He'd overslept, hadn't had time for his morning jog, and was speed-walking across campus with a fresh coffee and a breakfast burrito he'd grabbed from the cafeteria. The biosecurity alarms remained silent, but Krell, monitoring his usual camera feeds, still tensed when he saw Jake moving at that characteristic human pace. His claws hovered over the alert button for just a moment before he forced himself to relax. "It's just Jake," Krell muttered to himself, updating his log with a simple note. Human student Thompson observed in Northern Quad. No action required. Jake passed a group of first-year students who had clearly heard about him. They watched with wide eyes as he walked by, one of them nervously waving. Jake waved back, that terrifying smile on his face, and kept walking. "Did you see that?" one student whispered. "He showed his teeth." "That means he's friendly," another responded knowingly. "I read about it on the cultural exchange forums." "But how can you tell the difference between friendly teeth and aggressive teeth?" "I guess you just have to trust him." "That's terrifying." "Yeah, but he seems nice though." Professor Glebe's class had just started when Jake slipped in through the back door, trying to be inconspicuous. 17 alien faces turned to look at him. Jake gave an apologetic shrug and headed for his usual seat in the third row. Glebe's telepathic voice echoed in everyone's heads. "Nice of you to join us, Jake. Traffic? Overslept. Sorry, Professor. At least you didn't trigger a campus-wide evacuation this time." "That was one time." The class laughed, which still startled Jake a little because apparently 20 different species all had completely different laughing sounds, ranging from chittering to humming to what could only be described as rhythmic squeaking. "All right, everyone settle down," Glebe continued. "Today we're discussing quantum entanglement, and I promise it's less complicated than Jake's enrollment process was." More laughter. Jake pulled out his notebook and his phone, which he'd finally remembered to charge. His background was now a photo from Board Game Club, showing him and Pibbles and 6 other students gathered around a table, mid-game. Everyone in the photo was smiling, or doing whatever their species' equivalent of smiling was. Pibbles, sitting next to Jake, leaned over. "You good?" "Yeah, just tired. Need this coffee to kick in." "The thing with the caffeine stimulant?" "That's the one. Humans are so weird," says the guy who can retract his entire head into his body. "That's not weird, that's practical." "If you say so, buddy." Professor Glebe cleared his non-existent throat psychically. "If you two are done discussing anatomical differences, I'd like to start my lecture." "Sorry, Professor," they said in unison. Up in his security office, Krell watched Jake settle into class, just another student trying to stay awake during an early morning lecture. The biosecurity grid showed normal parameters. The threat assessment was green across the board. Campus life continued, unchanged except for the fact that everyone now knew humans were simultaneously terrifying and surprisingly friendly. Commander Thoop floated into Krell's office holding 2 beverages. "Morning. Brought you some kelp tea." "Thanks, sir." Krell accepted the cup gratefully. "Quiet day so far." "Any human incidents?" Jake was late to class. Walked fast. Nobody panicked. "Progress." Thoop's bioluminescence pulsed contentedly. "You know, I was thinking, if we can handle 1 human, maybe we should consider accepting more into the exchange program." Krell's eye stalks retracted slightly. "Sir, with all due respect, 1 human. Nearly gave me a stress disorder. But think of the cultural enrichment." "I'd rather not, sir. Plus, applications are already up 30%. Apparently word got out that we have a human student who survived multiple first contact scenarios, and now other humans think that sounds exciting." "Other humans want to come here?" "After hearing that we held one of them at gunpoint, they said, and I quote, 'That sounds hilarious, and where do I sign up?'" Krell put his head down on his console. "I'm going to need so much more therapy." On Thoop's datapad, a notification pinged. "New exchange student application. Emma Rodriguez, human, Earth, interested in xenobiology and meeting cool aliens." Commander Thoop looked at Krell. Krell looked at Commander Thoop. "I'm updating my resume," Krell said. "I'll write you a reference." Across campus, Jake finished his coffee, took notes on quantum entanglement, and remained blissfully unaware that he'd accidentally started an interstellar incident that would eventually be taught in first contact training seminars for the next 3 cycles. Professor Glebe's telepathic voice cut through his thoughts. "Jake, since you're here now, can you explain to the class how human observation relates to quantum mechanics?" Jake looked up from his notes. We observe things and they change?" "Close enough. Though to be fair, when you observe things, they also tend to panic and call security." The entire class erupted in laughter again. Jake groaned and put his head down on his desk, which caused a brief moment of alarm until everyone realized he was just embarrassed. Just another day at Galactic University, where the most dangerous thing on campus was a slightly caffeinated college student trying to pass his physics class. And somehow, that was exactly as terrifying and wonderful as it sounded.